Hi all, this is Steph Giordano with Human Services Research Institute. Welcome to the first module for this NCI AD refresher training for 2018-19. So here we're going to discuss a bit about national core indicators for aging and disabilities in terms of a national overview, provide a little bit of information about how states use NCI AD data, and then talk a bit about the Consumer Survey Administration. All right, so from a national perspective, this is still a fairly new project. We started back in 2015. This is a collaboration between the National Association of States United for Aging and Disabilities, or NASUID, as well as the HSRI, the organization I work with. This project grew out of the National Core Indicators, which was developed back in 1997, with a focus on adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. NCI AD is supported by participating states and funding from the Administration for Community Living. So NCI AD, as you all know, is focused on older adults and adults with physical disabilities who are served by state LTSS systems. The people you'll be speaking with will receive services from a number of various state entities, some of which are listed below. Your coordinator for NCI AD can give you more detail about the specifics in terms of the types of services that individuals may be receiving as part of your state sample. So in 2018-19, NCI AD is up to 20 participating states. We see those states in green here. All right, so talking a little bit about the purpose for this survey and why states participate in NCI AD, and this is information that's really helpful to be able to discuss and talk with individuals, families, providers, etc., people who you may be speaking with over the course of conducting these meetings, to really help people understand why this survey is important and why individual participation is important. So states use NCI data or gather NCI data in order to hear directly from those who are receiving services, to better understand the experiences of individuals who receive services and supports from the state, to assess their quality of life, their satisfaction with the services and supports they receive, as well as look at a number of other outcomes of those individuals who are receiving services. We work to support state aging, disability, and Medicaid agencies who want to measure their performance or measure the performance of the state LTSS systems, and to help states improve the quality of services and supports overall for individuals who are receiving services. So taking a look kind of generally at how states will use NCI data, and for this I really want to encourage you all, if you are unsure how your state uses or plans to use NCI data, please do talk to your coordinator. This is a really great way to help individuals engage and really know how important and meaningful their participation in the survey process is. But again, going over just some general ways that states will use NCI data is to identify areas where services could potentially improve for individuals, to be able to communicate with those who are receiving services, families, advocates, other stakeholders, including lawmakers and state legislatures, to identify areas where states can maybe do a deeper dive, better understand a particular issue that's maybe going on in the state. States will also look and compare programs across their state and look at other states that maybe have some, are excelling in various areas, and perhaps try to find some best practices that can be implemented in various programs or across the state. And also to track changes over time, so find out whether the needle moves based off of various policy implementation. So we're going to switch gears and start talking about the consumer survey itself, specifically the protocol for conducting the survey meeting. All right, so the consumer survey is really a guided conversation with individuals receiving services. We like to get away from calling this an interview because it's really not your standard ask a question, get an answer, and move to the next. But we really want you to ask questions, make sure people understand what's being asked, and feel comfortable giving their thoughts and opinions. So sometimes that will require doing some following up and probing. That really leads me into this next point, which is that the perspective of the individual is the absolute priority here. So we really want to know how people think and feel about the services and supports that they receive. The survey itself is key to important person-centered outcomes and measures system-level indicators. So generally you have those questions around choice and control, level of satisfaction with services and supports, etc. And this consistent survey approach is really important to ensuring reliability. So that's why we do these refresher trainings. And it's so important that all surveyors conduct the survey in a similar manner so that the data that states get back is valid and reliable and usable. So a little more about the consumer survey, and really this is that information that's so important to convey to the individual and perhaps others like family members, staff, providers, etc., really about the survey process. So the survey itself is totally voluntary. The person can choose not to take part at all if they don't want to. They can also choose not to answer certain questions that they're not comfortable with. That's totally fine. Survey information is kept confidential. That means that the individual's name, staff, providers, case managers, those names are not included in any of the data that is collected or reported on. It also means that after a meeting takes place, surveyors do not go off and talk with family members, staff, providers, etc. about what the person said as part of that meeting. Services and supports are not directly affected by participation, meaning that people's services are not increased or decreased because they took part in this NCI AD survey. The goal is really to make services better for everybody in the state. So the survey is not used to monitor individual providers, staff, or case managers. And as much as possible, you want the person to be able to choose when and where to meet so that they can find an environment where they feel most comfortable talking about their life, their thoughts and opinions about the services and supports they get. So the survey tool has a number of different sections. So we start off with that pre-survey form. This is really that information that is only for you all, the surveyors, to use. This is information that's used to help set up the meeting and is only used before the meeting actually takes place. We then have the background information section. This is 19 questions about the individual's demographics and some personal characteristics. Largely this comes from the state's records pertaining to the individual. We then have the full version of the consumer survey. This is 89 questions with 49 that can be answered by a proxy if needed. This includes, the full version includes both the subjective questions that can only be answered by the individual, as well as objective questions that can be answered by the individual or a proxy if needed. We also now include a person-centered planning module. Not every state will be using this module, but for those of you who are using it, we'll go through that a little bit later. We also have that proxy version of the survey, so it's just those 49 objective questions. We'll talk about this when we talk about the use of proxies, but this will only be used in the circumstances when the individual is not able to answer any questions on their own, and you'll be conducting the full survey with only a proxy. Then we have that interviewer feedback sheet. This is just that information about the kind of setup of the meeting, how long it takes, whether there are any questions that were difficult to answer. This is really helpful information for both the NCI AD national team to know about, as well as the state. So just some general guidelines here for conducting the survey. We do always want you to read questions as they're written first, but you may repeat or rephrase questions as needed. Most typically, we do not want you to read responses out loud, although there are some of those questions where we do allow you or want you to read off response options, but please do pay close attention to when that is the case. If a person's response does not clearly fit into one of the response options we we provide, we do want you to do a bit of following up and probing to find out if you can come to the most appropriate response. Now, occasionally this is not going to happen. That is totally okay. We have that don't know or unclear response that you can always use for those times when you're just not able to get at a response for a particular question. So before you get into the field, there are just a few things that you should check in with your coordinator on in case there have been any updates from your previous surveying years. So you want to just check in on how your state is planning to obtain consent, any kind of updates to mandated reporting requirements and needs, and how your state plans to handle unmet need follow-up. All right, and that takes us to the end of Module 1 for this refresher training. Just a really quick recap on some of the things that we've covered here. So we went over that national and state overview of what NCI AD is, the purpose for conducting these surveys, how NCI AD data are used in states, and some of the basic administration and protocol for conducting the consumer survey. Next up, we're going to be hearing about the pre-survey form and background information section of the consumer survey. So thank you all so much for listening into this first refresher training module.